Empire.
Welcome to Inside the Cap. I'm your host, Joel Corey. You can find me on Twitter at Corey Joel. That's CORRYJOEL. And also read my regular CBSSports.com column, Agents Take on NFL Salary Cap and Contract Matters. This time we're going to look at trading Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield, the first overall pick in the 2018 draft by the Cleveland Browns, went on the You Never Know podcast last week and said he felt disrespected 100%. This stems from being told one thing, the Browns doing another. Seems like Baker Mayfield has gotten the first lesson that any NFL player should learn. The NFL is a business. Teams are going to do what's in their own best interest. You should do what is in your own best interest as well. The Browns said right out in early January and in early March that they fully expected Mayfield to be the starting quarterback. Well, guess what? Things change when you have a chance to upgrade the position. Deshaun Watson, huge upgrade over Baker Mayfield. Mayfield requested a trade on March 17th, a couple days after the Browns started their pursuit of Deshaun Watson to trade for him, and were able to pull off the trade. Mayfield's first choice of a destination was the Indianapolis Colts, but they decided to go another direction and traded for Matt Ryan instead. Now, Baker Mayfield now knows is that he probably shouldn't have played through the torn labrum that he suffered in week 2 to his non-throwing shoulder, and also the fractured humerus that he suffered in week 6. That he didn't have the type of year he wanted, and the injury affected him. Probably should have shut it down, had surgery, kept on moving. Who knows? Maybe they don't make the move to get Deshaun Watson if he sits out half the year and the team has failings without him playing through an injury, because you don't get credit if you play poorly for playing through the injury. They're not going to go, we're going to grade him on a curve. He was hurt. So we'll take that into account. You put it on tape. You suit up. You're soon to be healthy enough to play. So what you do is what you do, and that's what he's learned. So Browns, huge upgraded quarterback. Baker Mayfield, next chapter of his career, doesn't know what's going to be written. Now, one of the things which is hurting Mayfield is the fact that you had Odell Beckham Jr., who looked like he couldn't play anymore with Baker Mayfield, goes to the Rams with Matthew Stafford. All of a sudden, he looks like more like the Odell Beckham Jr. you had with the Giants than at any other point than he did in Cleveland. So that's kind of an indictment on Mayfield as well. Mayfield is scheduled to make $18.858 million this year on a fifth-year option. As a first-round pick, there's a fifth-year option that for the 2018 draft class. Once the option was exercised, it's fully guaranteed at signing instead of just being guaranteed for injury, then becoming fully guaranteed when the first day of the league year comes up in the fifth year. Wouldn't have mattered in Mayfield's case because he was injured, so they couldn't have gotten out of it, even if they wanted to under the old system. Now, part of the problem with trading Baker Mayfield is there are multiple issues, but part of it is, one, nobody wants to take on an $18.85 million salary for Baker Mayfield when he's in his contract year, plus the way he played last year. Two, not a lot of teams have the salary cap space to acquire Baker Mayfield to accommodate that salary and have a need. Also, the quarterback carousel has been spinning and moving, and it's basically over. That you got two quarterbacks, veteran quarterbacks, that are on the trading block. In addition to Mayfield, you have Jimmy Garoppolo, who probably would have been traded but for the shoulder surgery that he had on his throwing shoulder from an injury that occurred in the NFC Championship. He probably has moved already, but for that. That's kind of cooled his marketplace, and from what we understand, the 49ers would want a day 2 pick, probably a second round pick for Garoppolo. So those are your two options of starting quarterbacks. Now, Mayfield mentioned in the podcast Seahawks. To me, the Seahawks make a ton of sense. Traded Russell Wilson to Denver. You got back Drew Lock is one of the multiple. You got several players back. You got Drew Lock back is one. The 2019 second round pick. He's got a salary of $1,451,022. Now, Seattle's been saying positive things about Drew Lock, but in this division where you have the defending Super Bowl champion Rams, you've got the 49ers who have enough talent that hopefully Trey Lance will still get them back to the playoffs. And you got the Cardinals, a playoff team, provided Kyler Murray is still their quarterback. The Seahawks are clearly the worst team in the division. And if you're talking Drew Lock as your quarterback and Geno Smith, who they just re-signed to a deal which is supposedly worth up to $7 million, base value was reportedly between 3, 5, and 4. I haven't seen any details about the deal. Those are your two quarterbacks, and you're sticking with that. If Pete Carroll gets that team to the playoffs this year, highly unlikely, he should be coach of the year. So to me, Baker Mayfield would be a huge upgrade. Prior to the Geno Smith signing, Seahawks had about 16-4 in cap room according to NFLPA data. That's just one team to me that screams a whole lot of sense for a quarterback. Now, the Carolina Panthers have been linked to Baker Mayfield through Mary Kay Cabot of the Cleveland Plain Dealer, also in Rappaport NFL Media, has linked the Panthers. They need to solve quarterback problem in the worst way. Matt Rule is on the hot seat, and whether he's back in 2023 will depend largely on what happens at quarterback. David Tepper, the owner, is impatient. They could take a quarterback at number 6. That seems a little high for this quarterback crop, but quarterbacks tend to get overdrafted all the time when it comes to the NFL draft. Malik Willis would seem to be the most logical choice there. He's linked there, maybe Kenny Pickett, but still, take quarterback at 6, you won't need a Baker Mayfield. They've gone from signing Teddy Bridgewater, getting rid of him after 1 year, trading for Sam Darnold. It didn't look any better than they did with the Jets. Then they signed, when he gets hurt last year, they signed Cam Newton. Cam Newton was not the Cam Newton that was there in Carolina the first time around. Haven't done anything at the quarterback position in a significant way. They lost out in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. So if you're talking Sam Darnold as your quarterback, Matt Rule is probably coaching college football in 2023 if Sam Darnold plays like he did consistently throughout his career so far with the Jets and the Panthers. So Mayfield would make sense there as well. Andrew Berry, the GM for the Browns, has said he has no pressure for a suboptimal trade. He said at the owners' meeting at the end of March. So ideally this gets done before the draft because you would want 2022 draft capital presumably. But in terms of that statement, sounds like Andrew Berry's not giving away Baker Mayfield. So there are two things. One, what would be the trade compensation? Fair trade compensation. Knowing the Browns have no leverage. They've got Jacoby Brissett as the backup, who they signed to a 1-year deal for $4.65 million, maxes out at 6-1 through incentives. There's talk they could keep Mayfield. Mayfield's not supposed to show up for off-season workouts that start on Tuesday. You really can't have Baker Mayfield. That's not a very tenable situation. Some people suggested, well, they could keep him around as insurance policy as a backup. That's what you got Jacoby Brissett for. That's a guy who's been a starter. Obviously, if he played well enough, the Colts wouldn't have signed Phillip Rivers, and he wouldn't have been the backup in 2020. Then he went to Miami. Watson probably gets suspended under the personal conduct policy. I don't know how long, assuming the discipline's this year. Maybe 6 games, maybe 8 games, 4 games, but he's going to miss time. So that's why people say you can keep Mayfield around. If I'm Mayfield, I want my situation resolved sooner rather than later. Because if I'm going to try to pick a starting spot if I'm going to try to compete for a starting spot, I want to be situated in a new place earlier so I can try to get up to speed with the offense. Well, ideally, if I'm Baker Mayfield, I want to be released and I can pick my spot as opposed to being traded by the Browns where they can send me what's in their interest, their best interest. But as I said, you've got what's the appropriate trade compensation, and then how much salary are the Browns going to have to eat to make this thing work? Because since no team's going to take on the full $18.858 million, let's look at the trade compensation first. Now, the Browns really, this is not going to happen. The Browns aren't going to get this type of trade compensation. Even if they eat, the more salary they eat, the better trade compensation it would be. But if you look at two guys who were traded in his draft class, both first-round picks, if you go back to 2019, when Josh Allen was a largely unproven commodity, still his career has never taken off, and he's turning to a journeyman. Arizona Cardinals got a second-round pick in 2019 and a 2020 fifth-round pick for Josh Rosen, trading him to the Dolphins. Now, last year, the Panthers gave up to the Jets a 2021 sixth-round pick, a 2022 second-round pick, and a 2022 fourth-round pick. Browns aren't getting anything remotely close to that as compensation for Baker Mayfield. Now, some other trades which have taken place in the last few years for quarterbacks. Gardner Minshew traded during the preseason last year from Jacksonville to Philadelphia for a sixth-round pick. He's playing for minimum salary as a sixth-round pick. You had Kyle Allen in 2020 go from Carolina to the Commanders, Washington Commanders, for a 2020 fifth-round pick. Joshua Dobbs in 2019 goes from Pittsburgh to Jacksonville for a 2020 fifth-round pick. A.J. McCarron, 2018, goes from the Bills to the Raiders for 2019 fifth-round pick. You had Teddy Bridgewater last year after Sam Darnold was traded. Carolina shipped him off to Denver for a 2021 sixth-round pick. That's just kind of, those are probably more realistic in the range. And if you want to get the most compensation, it wouldn't be a 2022 pick. It'd be a conditional 2023 pick, at least to me. So you wouldn't have the same sense of urgency to try to trade before the draft if I'm Cleveland. And maybe then you're talking more closer to the Tyrod Taylor compensation. In 2018, to be the bridge quarterback for the Browns, and he got hurt, and Baker Mayfield took his job and never looked back. 2018 third-round pick that the Browns gave the Bills for Tyrod Taylor. You had Joe Flacco in 2019 go from the Ravens to the Broncos for a 2019 fourth-round pick, but you had Teddy Bridgewater in 2018 when he was with the Jets. The Jets shipped Bridgewater in a 2019 sixth-round pick to the Saints for a third-round pick for him to be a backup to Drew Brees. And that paved the way for Sam Darnold to start without having anyone looking over his shoulder. So maybe it's a conditional 2023 pick based on his Mayfield's play time. I know in the Carson Wentz cases of his trades, one to the Colts from the Eagles and then from the Colts to the Commanders, that picks elevate based on like 70% play time. So maybe that's the threshold, and you use that to try to make a trade with Mayfield. Now, how much do you eat in terms of salary? In the NFL, you have to have enough cap room to accommodate the player's salary in a trade. Now, we saw last year at the trading deadline that Denver converted practically all but Von Miller's minimum base salary, $8-9 million of salary to get 222 picks, second and third round pick. Because the more salary you eat, the higher draft compensation goes up. So the Rams only had his minimum base salary for the rest of the year, which was a little over $700,000. I think it was $722,222. So that'd be the extreme case. The extreme case would be Cleveland eating all but Baker Mayfield's minimum salary, and his minimum salary this year is 1.035 million. Now, that's the extreme case, and I don't really think that's realistic. That Cleveland's going to eat $17.823 million of salary to trade Baker Mayfield, or so they got to get a great pick in return. And I'm assuming they want draft capital, not players. In Bridgewater's case, he was scheduled to make 18 million, had 10 million guaranteed, took a pay cut down to 11 million, deleted his 2022 year, all in the process. And the Broncos paid $7,062,500 on the way out the door. So that means the Broncos only had responsible for $4,437,500 of the salary when they acquired him. So Panthers have $30 million in cap space. They could afford the whole salary. They're not going to do that. Seahawks don't have that cap room. Well, if you look at, so the minimum you can talk about $7 million. It has to be eaten by the Browns, or you can look at it another way. Denver ate 61.41% of Mayfield's of Bridgewater's salary. So maybe it's Browns eat 11.858 million, which is in the same ballpark percentage wise. That means a new team takes on 7 million in salary. But I don't think it's going to be Browns eating 17.823 million. Some team gets Baker Mayfield for 1.035 million. What if this thing drags on? He's not showing up for the offseason workout program, but he would be contractually obligated to show up for the minicamp. The minicamp, mandatory June minicamp, is from the 14th to the 16th. And if you skip all 3 days of minicamp unless you have an excused absence, the fine would be $95,877. I would imagine if they're trying to deal him, they'd excuse him from the minicamp if it got to that. The Browns are going to the extreme and do what's in their best interest. They're going to hold out and keep him, squat on him until they see if there's a quarterback injury. Maybe in training camp. We saw that happen back when Teddy Bridgewater had that gruesome knee injury. The Vikings gave a first and fourth round pick to the Eagles for Sam Bradford in 2016. That's the extreme case. I don't think it'll be anything. Obviously, draft compensation wouldn't be like that, but that's if they decided to drag this thing out. Now, if they can't get the trade compensation they want, some people said, well, they'll just release him. I don't think they're going to. They give him away. They get something in return. A conditional pick. Worst case scenario. It really shouldn't be any worse than a 6th-round pick that you had, like Garner Minshew, go for. Really shouldn't be a fifth for like the Kyle Allens of the world and the Josh Dobbs. That's really what the worst case should be, at least to me. But if they released him, then you got one thing which comes in question. It's kind of a minor issue. CBA is silent on whether the guarantee has an offset. It has language different from the 2011 CBA to the 2020 CBA. It talks all about the guarantees voiding and what happens in those cases, but both CBAs don't address the offset. Now, I know from talking to the union in the past that they take the position that there's no offset with the guarantee for fifth-year options, which would mean that the Browns would be on the hook for all $18.858 million. Wouldn't get to offset the guarantee by whatever Mayfield signed elsewhere. And from a practical standpoint, even if the offset did apply, he's signing for league minimum on a 1-year deal elsewhere, most likely. So they're not going to get much of a cap break. But that would have everything would have to go wrong for them to release Baker Mayfield at some point. You think they're going to get something in return. It's just a question of when it happens. If it happens before the draft, most likely Carolina. To me, Seattle makes the most sense. Geno Smith, Drew Lock, that's your starting quarterbacks. You might be in play for Bryce Young, assuming he has a type of year that he had this year and won the Heisman next year. That's what I think. But we'll see where this thing gets done and where it drags out. If Panthers take a quarterback at number 6, then they're out, and Baker Mayfield, it'll be Seattle or bust to start, and it's probably looking to be a backup next year if those two teams are out of the equation. So we'll see when this Baker Mayfield thing gets done, and hopefully there's not going to be a lot of drama with Baker Mayfield as we head into the start of training camp. Well, that's going to be it for this week's Inside the Cap. You can find me on Twitter at Corey Joel, that's CORRYJOEL, and you can read my regular CBSSports.com column, Agents Take, as well. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you back here next time. Goodbye.